It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. I'm David First, filling in for Brian today. And now we focus on New York's horse carriage industry and what its future may be. Last week, an 18-year-old tourist, Romansh Mahajan, died after falling out of a horse carriage during a ride in Central Park with his family. New York's iconic horse carriages have been the subject of debate for years. Multiple mayors have confronted the issue. One of Bill de Blasio's campaign promises was to ban them. Eric Adams called for an end to their use this past fall, and Mayor Mamdani straddled both sides of the issue during his campaign. But despite years of promises, the carriages still remain in use. That may be changing. Last week's incident has renewed calls to ban the horse carriages in Central Park, and now City Council Speaker Julie Menin has announced that will be a hearing in July on legislation to carry out the ban following Mahajan's death. Gothamist reporter Liam Quigley has more on the history of the debate and what could happen next. Liam, welcome back.
Hello, how are you?
So let's go over some of these basic details. Can you tell us what happened in Central Park last Wednesday?
Yeah, this was a violent crash. Basically, it was reported that the driver had stepped away to take a photo of the family who was in town visiting, stepped off the horse, off the carriage, and then the horse bolted. And it was a violent crash. And this young man was trying to save his mom and was killed in the crash. I was the first, or among the first reporters on the scene in the aftermath, and you can see it was very violent. The carriage was, shattered over part of the drive. The horse was uninjured, but this is the first, to the industry's knowledge, as far as we can find, the first death of a passenger in the park riding on one of these horse carriages. The NYPD is still investigating that crash, but like you said, it's led to this big renewed push to ban the industry, which it comes up once every 3 to 4 to 5, 6 months. There's another incident, but this is the first where a passenger has been killed in a crash, as far as we can tell.
That stepping away to take a picture, is that something that is not on the list of things you're allowed to do?
The Transit Workers Union said, the rides were suspended for 2 days following the crash to get all the drivers retrained. They said that shouldn't have happened. So the rides were paused, but no, that's not something the horse carriage driver is supposed to do, when you have passengers sitting on the carriage.
Listeners, if you'd like to join this discussion, we welcome you to call in on this as well. 212-433-9692. What do you think? Are horse carriages inhumane and dangerous, and should they be banned? Or should the industry not be defined by a few recent incidents? Do you think there could be a compromise moving forward? Plus, if you work with horses, or if perhaps you are a carriage driver yourself, we would love to hear your thoughts. So let us know, 212-433-WNYC. That's 212-433-9692. You can call or text. So, Liam, this conflict has been ongoing for years, as we detailed. Multiple mayors have taken this on. Could you give us a little more history on this topic and explain why attempts to ban the carriages have been unsuccessful so far?
Bloomberg regulated. De Blasio promised to get rid of them. That was he put a huge stake in the ground there, and he failed to do it. And that was it's a big point of criticism for him among those who obviously want the industry banned. Eric Adams eventually came out against the industry. He was unsuccessful in shutting it down. And Mamdani has said he wants to see it shut down, though he does want to work with this, the TWU, the Transport Workers Union, who are very influential and are defending this union and the union jobs that it represents. So it's been a battle for a long time, and it's been through multiple mayors.
Well, what about that proposal from Mayor Adams? It would help transition drivers into new jobs?
There's council legislation that used to be called Rider's Law. It was named after a horse who collapsed and died in the street. It's now Romansh's Law for the 18-year-old who was killed. That's, as you mentioned in your intro, been advanced to the stage of a hearing next month by Council Speaker Julie Menin. That legislation would phase out the industry by stopping new licenses for horse-drawn carriages. You'd basically sunset it by June 2028. It would provide for, working with the council, ways to keep people in union jobs. Exactly what those jobs would be is not clear, and it would prevent the slaughter of existing carriage horses. So that's the main mechanism by which the people who want to get rid of this industry are kind of see as a way out of it.
Well, one of the main organizations that is pushing for the ban of horse carriages is NYCLASS, NYCLASS, NYCLASS. And I believe we have someone with NYCLASS on the phone now. Adita, are you joining us from Queens today? Welcome.
Yes, I am here. Let me take you off speaker. Yes, I'm here. Hi there.
Good.
Hi there. We are absolutely heartbroken and devastated over the death of Romanche, and we literally stood on the steps of City Hall a week before his totally preventable death, urging City Council, saying someone is going to die if this keeps getting delayed. There had been 7 other violent runaway crashes that injured people, sent them to the hospital. Horses have continued to collapse and die. The city knew that someone was likely going to be killed, and now that has happened. And New Yorkers have had enough. We are in direct contact with the Mahajan family, and they have been speaking out strongly. They wanted this law named after Romanche. They have directed letters to Speaker Julie Menin and the mayor. They are demanding that they pass Romanche's law with immediate effect. They said the danger is active, present, and entirely preventable, and that every single day that those carriages are permitted to continue operating, more innocent lives are placed in direct jeopardy. They were particularly outraged that the city allowed those horse carriages to go back on the streets just days after their son's tragic death in the same conditions that led to his death. Look, horses are powerful prey animals. They will spook and bolt at any moment, and when they're attached to a carriage, they become a deadly weapon. Nothing, no amount of regulation or reform is going to stop that.
Okay.
There will be more violent runaways. This family and New Yorkers want the city council to finally shut this down.
Okay, Adita, thank you so much for joining us with those comments. And can you respond to some of what Adita was covering there, and also maybe cover some of what will be in the bill set to be renamed Romanche's Law?
Yeah, you can hear, I don't know, Adita, if you're still on the air, but I remember asking you before this death happened if this was going to remain just this political hot potato that gets kicked from administration to administration. But it sounds like, and really the case is now that there's a death of a passenger, and that's activists are seizing on that moment to say, let's get this banned now. And like we were discussing earlier, the formerly known Riders Law, now renamed Romanche's Law, would transition, sunset the industry, provide somehow for job transitions, and that would sunset the industry by June 2028 if that were to be enacted.
And we have, if you'd like to join the discussion, 212-433-9692. We have a carriage driver joining us now from Manhattan. Dave, welcome.
Thank you very much. I've been a carriage driver since the early 80s, and all of the push to get the carriages business demise comes from the real estate industry. If a short walk down 38th Street, right by the Javits Center, everything is tremendously in view. All the buildings are coming down on 38th Street except for the 2 carriage stables, which were built in the 1890s. And you look 1-2 blocks south, and there's the Vessel from Hudson Yards. The money from NYCLASS is coming from developers, realtors affiliated with Hudson Yards. Anytime you got mammals working, horse, humans, there's going to be an odd a problem, some sort, that's probably going to generate a lot of publicity. But the context of the New York City carriages is that there are 68 carriages each carriage goes out twice a day, 136 shifts, 8-hour shifts, over 1,000 per day, times 365. You're looking at between 300,000 and 400,000 equine hours worked annually. There just is no context for to get rid of them, other than the real estate is valuable. My heart goes out to the family who lost a child. I've been in the business 40 some odd years, and I can't even imagine. I've never heard of anything like that occurring.
Dave, stay with us for just a moment. But Liam, if you could respond to some of that. The drivers' union has accused NYCLAS of being a real estate front, right? You wrote an article where you quoted Union Vice Chair Alexander Kemp, who said, quote, NYCLAS was founded by real estate executives. They spend decades in the real estate business. They're more interested predominantly in just getting the land, where the developers want to build hotels and luxury houses. Make sense of this for me. What is that argument all about?
That's been a longstanding criticism on the part of the union of NYCLAS, which is a big kind of headline group that's against this industry, but there are others. And it's not as if NYCLAS is the only voice in the room here. But I would be curious to know from the caller, what, if not banning the industry, what could make it safer? Because there was the death of a horse a couple weeks before the teenager was killed in the crash. Are there things that could be done to prevent deaths of animals in the future, for example? Dave?
Of course, yeah. There's 200 some odd drivers in the business, and vigilance is probably not 100%, and that's what probably arose to this problem. If I can add one other thing to my last statement, is you want to see in a system where they're trying to ban the carriages, you want to see expert testimonial backing this up, like large mammal equine vets. There literally has never been. Every time there's a hearing at City Council on a banning hearing, you never hear of vets piping in saying, yes, we concur after all of our years of study of equine physiology that this should take place. It's never happened. And that is your biggest clue as to what's truly going on here. And it is all real estate.
What about, this idea in some of these in some of the banning legislation, transitioning to another job, Dave? Is that something you would be open to?
Well, not really, just because I don't think there is any real logistics to banning them. You get a bad occurrence, and this one, I still am just heartsick about this whole thing. But I don't think there has been any kind of an injury in the carriage business with a passenger, going back at least 100 years. If somebody can come up with reasons other than, all right, there was an accident. Most of the time the accidents, and this is in the 99th percentile, a carriage a horse will bolt something, he wasn't tied down, the driver wasn't vigilant enough. It's now with everybody having a video camera in their pockets, it's very visual. The carriage goes down the street, several cars get scratches, the carriage itself is turned to matchsticks. The horse is fine, driver's fine, nobody got hurt, and that's been the history. But again, in the context of how many rides there are and what's the totality of the field, that it's just not that likely of an occurrence, or it just doesn't happen in any kind of statistical sense that would ban or that would warrant a ban.
Okay, Dave, thanks for joining our conversation today. Liam?
I think it's worth mentioning that the Central Park Conservancy, which has recently come out against the carriage horse industry, points to a number of incidents, including one, I believe, late last year in which a horse bolted and some passengers, tourists, jumped from the carriage just in the nick of time. So I think I appreciate the statistical anomalies highlighted, but they're not so anomalous that you do see once every X months a horse dying in the street or a crash involving a horse. I mean, I know that Transport Workers Union will point to e-bikes or crashes involving other modes of transport in the park, which certainly have resulted in serious injuries and occasional death. But I think you do have to recognize that there is a tally of a bit of chaos every once in a while in this industry.
If you're just joining us, I'm David First, filling in for Brian today. Our guest is WNYC reporter Liam Quigley. We're talking about what is happening with the carriage horse industry in Central Park. Let's hear from Yael in Manhattan. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for this conversation. I'm a bit curious. I'd love to talk a little more about the politics of the union in this conversation. We've seen polls showing that the vast majority of New Yorkers actually do want to see this banned. And so, with respect to the carriage driver who mentioned that NY class might be supported by real estate, I mean, those of us who really support this ban are not backed by real estate. And Mayor Mamdani, when asked during the election what he thought about this issue, at first said that it's terrible and he wants to ban it. And I think it was about 12 hours later that he reversed course. And I have to suspect it's because then he got a call from the unions. So my question is, if the majority of New Yorkers, I think the last poll I saw was as much as like 80-something%, do want this outlawed, and a small number of carriage workers are represented by the union, is the right strategy here all about union politics and figuring out how to convince a union, or should the vast majority of New York residents have a stronger say in what this outcome is?
Okay, great question. Thanks for calling.
Mamdani has said he wants to get rid of the industry, but yes, it's true. He hasn't done it. There's still horse carriages in Central Park right now. So if he's the mayor, why hasn't he just done this? He's the guy in charge, right? City Hall officials have told me that this is not, this industry exists as a matter of law. So you can't it doesn't rise to the level of something that the mayor can do away with the stroke of a pen. That would have to be something like a disaster declaration, which they say this doesn't rise to. So I think that's why everybody's going to be watching this hearing next month, which could, be a path for Mamdani and Council Speaker Menon and the City Council to legislatively do away with the industry. So that's, yes, the union is powerful. They represent thousands and thousands of people who work on buses and subways in the city. They really have put a big stake in the ground at defending this industry. And they say, look, these are blue-collar jobs. This is part of the fabric of New York City. These horse carriages are like, this is New York.
Liam, we're getting several texts like this. Cars, you touched on this a little bit earlier. Cars, buses, scooters, mopeds, and people kill people. I do not hear any focus on banning any of those things.
I mean, certainly there's people who would like to ban e-bikes from the city. People have been successful in getting the e-bike speeds limited to 15 miles per hour,
right,
which under Adams and Mamdani, who has basically supported that. So I think that we've seen restrictions on other modes of transport. But yes, I mean, this is the first death in this industry. I understand the comparison. So that's why I think why so many people are seized onto this moment and looking at this hearing next month.
And we have a question about electric carriages. What about these horseless carriages that they say could replace the horse and carriage? What would they be like? Could that mean new jobs for the people who could potentially lose jobs with a ban?
The electric carriages, which is like they're kind of old looking, vintage-esque looking cars based on some of the photos I've seen, I don't think they're taken super seriously by the union. I don't know if a tourist coming to New York City is going to be so inclined to get on a strange looking car in Central Park. It doesn't really hit the same as a big animal pulling a horse. Like, that's not the stuff of fairy tales.
It doesn't have the same kind of a sales pitch.
Yeah, it's not. It's something new. I mean, you can make it look old, but it's an electric car. So I don't know how big of a part that would be. Maybe those come back again as the hearing is discussed. As the legislation moves forward, maybe that's, we're switching to that again.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the crux of it is, are we going to keep having big animals going around Central Park, not how we replace them?
Okay, another call, 212-433-9692. Jeff in Astoria, welcome to the Brian Lair Show.
Hi, good morning. I live in Astoria, but I'm in the park between 4 and 6 times a week, as I'm an avid cyclist. And this story is framed completely wrong. This is a health and safety issue. The horses themselves and the carriage themselves can cause an inordinate amount of congestion in the most congested part of the park. That's bad. Even worse is the tremendous amount of feces they leave throughout the park. The feces has obviously bacteria, potentially causes disease. I don't care how much the carriage operators and other supporters claim that they clean it up. They don't. Anybody can go down there at any time and see the tremendous amount of feces that lines the streets at the busiest part of the park. We wouldn't tolerate it anywhere else in the city. This is a situation where you're talking about 8 million plus New Yorkers, plus the 40-odd million people that visit Central Park versus 200 union jobs. I'm not anti-union, but this is a case where the union is just wrong, and they're holding the rest of the city hostage over a health and safety issue. It causes congestion, which can lead to issues of crashes and safety, as well as just the feces strewn throughout the park.
And there we are coming back to the feces, getting right at it there, Jeff. What about that, Liam?
I mean, I certainly remember that odor being up at 6 a.m. on a slightly damp day as you hit the south of the park, and it's like, you definitely want fenders on your bike if it's wet out. But yeah, I mean, DCW, the city inspects the horses. They broadly pass their, safety inspections. The NYPD vets check on the health and safety of the animals. But yeah, I mean, it is unpleasant. Though I don't know of any confirmed cases of human sickness from the horse manure. Is it manure or feces when it's in that context?
I'm going to go with either one.
Thank you.
I get it either way. I understand what you're talking about, so that works. And I really, we're talking about a lot of different issues here. Just heard about the health and safety issue from Jeff, but I really don't want this to be lost in the conversation either. Danielle, calling from the Upper West Side, wants to call in with another point as well. Welcome to the Brian Lair Show.
Hi there. Yeah, I've been hearing there are bikes and, electric bikes and cars and buses and so on, but, they're not living creatures. Horses are, beautiful animals. They're not a bike. So that aspect, it's like, well, we have bikes, they hurt people. As if, why should we ban bikes? Like leaving out that component of it, that this is a beautiful animal that is put out in the street in horrible conditions as far as I'm concerned. And there used to be stables right by my husband's business years ago on 52nd Street. And they were just horrible, They're like a horse being in the zoo, basically.
Well, Danielle, thank you so much for your comments. And Liam, what about that, the health and safety of the horses?
I think you can hear there that that's a huge underline of this whole thing is people love and people really care about these animals. So that's always a flame in the back of this debate. Mamdani has said he wanted to tour those stables. The union has defended the condition of those stables. The animal rights groups have attacked the conditions of those stables. That's another back and forth in this debate. But though I don't know what the results of Mamdani's tour was, or if he did tour those, I think that's an ongoing thing, is the treatment of the animals. Though, as far as I know, DCWP, the city's agency of consumer and worker protection, I couldn't find many violations as far as the treatment of the animals when I looked through their assessment of the industry, but you can hear it's something that people really are concerned about.
We had a caller call in to say that the veterinarians who treat the horses say they're healthy, so I'll just throw that in for what it's worth. And just to wrap up, Liam, what's next here?
This council hearing in July is going to reveal a lot about where people are at on the issue, who's going to sign on. But it seems like there's momentum growing in the city council. And then it's going to, what are we going to see Mamdani do on this? And how hard is the union that represents the carriage drivers going to fight on this? How hard are the animal rights activists going to fight on this? But it certainly seems like this is like a big moment of, are we going to continue to have these horses in the park or not?
Okay, and thanks everyone for all of your calls. We obviously can't get to all of them, but thanks so much for calling in, and thank you very much for your patience. WNYC's Liam Quigley, thank you for joining us and for your continuing coverage of the story.
Thank you.
It's the Brian Lehrer Show. I'm David First, filling in for Brian today. And coming up, Mayor Mamdani promised a rent freeze for rent-stabilized tenants, and the Rent Guidelines Board delivered. Housing reporter David Brandt will join us to give us all the details. But first, the latest news with WNYC's Michael Hill. Hey.
David, good morning. The death toll from two powerful earthquakes in Venezuela has now risen to nearly 600, with nearly 3,000 hurt. This is according to acting Venezuela's president, Delcy Rodriguez. The back-to-back quakes measured 7.2 and 7.5 magnitude Wednesday evening. The military has gotten involved as crews search for survivors and distribute food and water. The earthquakes are among the strongest in Venezuela in more than a century, affecting millions and causing widespread devastation. New York City tenants are celebrating after the city's Rent Guidelines Board approved a first-ever 2-year freeze on new leases last night. Emma Rahak is 24 and lives in Washington Heights. She says all of her expenses are rising and a rent freeze will allow her to stay in New York.
A rent increase would have meant that me and my neighbors are going to get displaced. A rent freeze means that we have a fighting chance to stay.
Landlord groups say the freeze may be politically popular but will prevent owners from making needed repairs in their buildings. Governor Kathy Hochul is buying New York City more time to follow a state rule that restricts child care vouchers for use only when a parent is on the job. WNYC's Karen Yee reports it's a relief for families and their providers.
When the state began cracking down last year, child care advocates warned limiting voucher use for parents working irregular hours would cause major disruptions. Some providers said they wouldn't survive financially, having to patch together kids needing care at different hours every day. And parents working nights, weekends, or seasonally would lose coverage hours for time they need to sleep, find other work, or run errands. Now Hochul is giving New York City a 2-year waiver to comply, with a requirement the rest of the state already follows. The vouchers help more than 100,000 families afford childcare.
Carlos Mendoza has been fired as manager of the underperforming New York Mets and has been replaced by Andy Green. New York has 34 wins and 47 losses after a 6-game losing streak. They are 15 games behind National League East leading Atlanta and 9.5 games back of the National League's last wild card berth. Mets owner Steve Cohen had high expectations for the team without a World Series since 1986. The team opened the season with baseball's highest payroll at $358 million. Mid-70s with some clouds now, mostly cloudy today, a high temperature in the mid-80s. Come tomorrow, a 50-50 chance of showers, mostly cloudy, a high near 80 and a calm wind. And then on Sunday for the Pride Parade, mostly sunny, a high near 83. Michael Hill, WNYC News.